Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, welcome everybody to episode 2 of our podcast, which working title so far is United We Talk. Let's talk about this politics thing without going toxic and hateful and, you know, yeah,
Yeah.
bad, dark. Well,
Absolutely.
dark. It might get dark, but not dark, but not dark at each other,
Right.
Yeah.
Mutually respectful, engaged,
Yeah.
rational. Yes.
Right.
Yes.
All right. So we were talking earlier. I was writing this morning about, in 2020, I forget if it was in 2020 that I started to be, public politically, or if it started a little bit before, but definitely during 2020, I was started talking about COVID and BLM and that kind of thing. And, we had the people who wanted us to write a statement in support of BLM back in 2020 and all of that. And so I was reflecting on so what I've noticed as I've been writing on this book is that I woke up yesterday, I woke up at 4 something, night before yesterday. And my body was kind of in fear. This morning, I woke up at 2 something.
Mm.
And it's really affecting me emotionally. It's triggering some old trauma. And, I experienced that trauma 4 years ago. And, but it doesn't, it predates that. Obviously it's my trauma or my triggering my feelings. But I figure we could just talk about that a little bit because it's something that I think it's not just me that experiences something like this. Yeah. So, there were 3 events that came to mind when I was thinking back to what happened back then 4 years ago. Number one was the PR agency that we'd hired, we were working with, and we were paying them $6,000 a month or something to do PR and try to bring, some stories in media and whatnot. And then and it was a founder that I considered myself friends with. We'd met recently. I'd invited him to private dinner and really build a relationship with him. And he had this agency, and I was like, you know what? Let me work with him. I believe in him. And then I was posting some stuff to my Facebook, and I think if I remember right, it was what I'd learned from reading Tom Sowell's book titled Black Rednecks and White Liberals. Have you ever read that, by the way?
I haven't. No.
It was mind-blowing for me. He's a Black professor. I think it's Stanford, older guy in his 80s now. He's been active in politics many, many years. And in the book, he just completely retold the story of race relations and slavery in America in a way that I've never heard before. And it was so, eye-opening for me to hear that. I was like, oh, I didn't know that that's how it worked. I had a completely different picture in my mind. So I wanted to share that with other people. I was like, I just learned this, and it's so fascinating. And yeah, then this guy called me one day and he's like, yeah, this is a little bit uncomfortable, but I can't continue to work with you. The team is uncomfortable. They don't like it and I'm like, why? Well, because of the things I posted. And that was kind of it. And he was like, wanted to get off the call. And I was shook. And I was actually working with this guy on some partner. I'm not going to name names here, but we were working with another consultant on partnership at the time, and he was Black. And so I asked him, did you watch it? Did I overstep? Did I cross a line here? And he was like, no, you're fine. People are just getting triggered there. You didn't say anything, wrong there. And literally everything I wrote, I learned from Tom Sowell, a Black professor. So,
Right.
But it totally shook me. And then I was like, hey, but we're still friends. Let's connect. Let's grab dinner. Let's talk about this. I want to understand what you heard or what was offensive to you. And I want to also, if there's something that you misunderstood, I want to be able to explain myself and maybe there's something I phrased in a way that was not helpful. But he never since I've reached out several times. Hey, have you given up on this? Let's see if we can. And just nothing, gone. We've met in person at a mastermind, and he was cordial and nice, but dead. Right. it fucking stung. I mean, it hurts. And I think for me that the trauma is part of it is the rejection. Part of it is the like feeling falsely accused of something that I didn't do. And part of it is like not really knowing what it is. Like, what did I do wrong? But clearly I did something wrong. And now there's just this like cold, you know, disconnect. And like you're not, you're tainted. You're like you have you're what is it called? Leper or something, right? Like you're we
Right.
don't want to have anything to do with you. And yeah, it hurt. It
Sure.
really did.
Yeah. Yeah. It's
Yeah.
somebody that you had trusted and felt, like you said,
Yeah.
had a personal relationship with them.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
really like open up to and sort of invited into my life and yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then just gone. Like it's like, hey, I care about you. I still care about this person as a person. If he came back and he said, hey, you know what? Like that thing that happened here, I'm sorry I overreacted a little bit. Like I do think that whatever you this thing or that thing was really inappropriate, but I overreacted a little bit, blah, blah, blah. I would be open to having that conversation, right?
Hmm. Right.
But if of course this was like during the BLM and all of that stuff and the riots, and he posted, I forget, was it Black Squares you had to post back then, or what was the thing? But he was
Right.
doing all of that, right?
Right.
So he was in that, and I still don't think that that was like the like I think there's a whole like that's a whole other conversation we can have. But like I
Right.
think that was like a sort of a social blackmail operation of some to some extent. But
Yeah.
I don't hold it against people who bought into it or maybe still buy into it. Like there, I can still respect those
Right.
people as humans and feel love for them and understand where they're coming from. Right.
Right. Yeah, I think I mean, it's the concept of a litmus test, right? Of like,
Mm-hmm.
do you pass this test or do you not pass this test in
Mm-hmm.
order to be an acceptable person for me to interact with? Um, because I mean, back when the Black Lives Matter stuff was happening, you and I were having some pretty heated conversations about that. I think I wrote you a letter expressing my feelings on it fairly strongly. Like we came at it from different perspectives, and we could have a conversation about it. Um, and be able to say, this is where I disagree with you,
Mm-hmm.
like both ways.
Yeah.
And I think sounds like that's what was missing, was that this person wasn't willing to engage in that kind of conversation. And I guess the question I would ask both of us in that is like, okay, if that were to happen to me, would like it's not about your worth as a human being, right? Like something's getting
Mm-hmm.
triggered in you that feels like a
Oh, for
rejection
sure.
as a human being, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
you are unacceptable, somehow you are a leper, you are taboo, like you are
Right.
like,
Oh, totally.
and you're that's like hitting some like wound that
For
you're talking
sure.
about, some earlier trauma, as
Yeah.
opposed to saying, wow, that person is in the middle of something right now, they have a very different perspective than I do,
Mm-hmm.
we're not meant to be working together right now.
Yeah. 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 Yeah, and
Yeah.
I do think that like I've learned from Byron Katie that when in those situations, reminding myself that I've been spared. Like when
Hmm.
people choose not to be in my life, I didn't lose anything. I was spared. And I did have an earlier situations where some friends, some high school friends, we were a group of guys, 5, 8 peak guys, depending on how you count it, that would like meet regularly, dinners, parties, whatnot. And all of a sudden, didn't get invited anymore.
Mm.
And when I reached out to people individually, they were like, "Oh, I'm busy. No, I can't. Oh, I can't on that date. No, I don't have like it." But no, there's never any. Hey, this is what you did. Here's how you transgressed. This is what we don't agree with. It's just like, no, we're just not
Mm.
talking anymore. And I
Right.
never got an answer. And then
Yeah.
some years later, maybe almost 10 years later or something, like it was probably 5 years ago, I reached out to one of them, kind of the sender guy in that group. And I was like, "Hey, do you want to meet up again? Like, I would love to reconnect." And at that point, I think I reconnected with one of the guys, and he was like totally fine. He didn't know why I'd been,
Right.
excommunicated all of a sudden. So he
Right.
had no part in that. But then, and I don't think I did get an answer ever, but I was like, all right, let's just start to reconnect and had a good lunch and talked. And then like he started following me on Twitter, and then he started like I reconnected and I realized, no, I had been spared.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that sounds like somebody who disagrees with something that you're saying, but isn't willing to say that to your face for whatever reason, you know?
Exactly.
Like,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. But, and
Yeah.
that's exactly the pattern, right?
Hmm.
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
the disconnect. And I guess like we attract the things that we need, the situations and circumstances to show where we're not free. And
Right.
so apparently I needed to have this experience to multiple times to see where I'm not free.
Hmm.
Um, and yeah, so the other two, I want to go in, I want to dive into like what that is, but I just wanted to mention the other two that came to me this morning. So one was this guy who was a marketer behind $100 million well-known brand, um, in the sort of the health supplement space. And he was the marketing genius behind it. I was doing Body Meal and I was like, hey, let's partner up on that. And he was very interested in that. We were really saw eye to eye on spirituality, on entrepreneurship, and all the things. We were so aligned. And then again, BLM happens and all that stuff. And then I text him and reach out to him again to reconnect and just or continue the conversation. And he says literally, Calvin, you can go ahead and delete my number. I have zero tolerance for racism and bigotry in my life. Like, okay, all right. Um, yeah, a little shocked there.
Right.
Um, and then there was this health company that we were in talks with. We had Matt working on the team as COO at the time, right? He was in talks and we were going back and forth and contracts. And I think we did some features for them, et cetera. We're pretty far down that path. And it looked like it might bring us like a significant number of new members. And it was looking really good. And then one evening, as I was coming home from dinner with my wife, I got this email that says, this letter serves as our notice to you that we're terminating our relationship with Simplero pursuant to the terms of the agreement dated May 12, 2020. Pursuant to this agreement, please destroy all company confidential information provided to Simplero. And that's it. And then like
Hmm.
no response to any communications beyond that point.
Hmm. I don't
So
think I knew
yeah,
that. Yeah.
yeah.
Hmm.
So what is that?
Like, what is, um,
What like in your mind, what is that when people I'll dive into my feeling side in a minute, but in your
mhm.
mind, when people do that, what is that? When people respond that way?
It's a good question. I mean, the first thing that pops to mind is like it's some boundary setting, right? It's like them saying, like, this is a boundary for me, and I'm not willing to have a conversation about it because even that conversation feels either unsafe or like a waste of time and energy. Or like, I think sometimes folks on a variety of sides of issues will say, I don't want to waste my time trying to convince somebody else to do something, to change their mind. I don't want to have that
Mhm.
conversation, these kinds of conversations, because it's a waste of time. Nobody's ever going to change their mind.
Mhm.
Like, we're just going to disagree. I need to save my energy for something else. And
Sure.
so like maybe it's somebody who's in that place of like
Mhm.
trying to conserve energy. Um, I don't know enough about these situations, those people, to know to what extent they were like that the time that you're talking about was particularly emotional for a lot of people. Like some
Mhm.
big stuff was happening. People were very
Mhm.
stressed. And so it may be that there were people who literally didn't have the reserves, like didn't have the emotional
Right.
capacity to engage with
Yeah.
somebody that they felt was not supportive of them. And
Mhm. Mhm.
so I guess those are
Yeah.
my two like immediate responses, that it doesn't have actually a whole lot to do with, it's certainly not personal to you. It's a way of saying
Mhm.
these concepts that you want to talk about or that you are talking about are not conversations I want to be a part of right now. And
Yeah.
so like, no, thank you. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. And I think if it was like if these were strangers, totally fine,
Right.
right? But
Right.
in every case, there was actually quite a bit of a relationship built up already here, and I think
Mm-hmm.
that's what stings.
Sure.
But then again, like, I mean, the rational side of me is like, well, good to know now, right? Like, it would be worse
Right.
to actually go into business together, um, or be further down the line. I did get a little pissed about the PR guy agency because they wanted us to pay like,
Mm,
like not the full contract, but I'm like, hey, if you're firing us, like
right,
when we're still like just a few months into this and gotten zero results, like
right,
we're not gonna pay
right,
everything here. Like, come on.
right. Yeah,
And they did agree to that, but I was like, that should have been a given anyway. But
yeah.
yeah, it's the fact that there's a relationship there, right? And I think, I mean, remember years ago, I had a guided visualization where one of the things that came up was this past life memory. Like, I never know if these are real or not. I don't think it
Right.
matters. Like, it's like archetype stuff, right? But it's like this idea of being it was a feeling of being a medicine man in some tribe somewhere. And as the medicine man, I had access to special information from special sources, and I shared that truthfully and honestly. And it wasn't whatever the leader of the tribe or whatever wanted to hear. And so I was kicked out, and there was lots of misery and pain and just like
Right.
a very hard, painful death ensued.
Mm,
Yeah. And it is that, you know, as humans, we know instinctively that if we're cast out of the tribe, we're on our fucking own,
right.
and we're going to die. We cannot live
Right.
alone on the savannah without the tribe. We can today. Well, we can't, right? But we can plug into a grid where we don't need, you know,
Right.
well, we still need a source of income.
It's
We
different.
need a
So
lot of things.
there's not a
Huh?
lion chasing you. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. We're not going to be eaten. Right. But
Right.
yeah. So things are a
Yeah.
little bit different.
Yeah. But there is that same need to belong, need to like connect. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's just deep, emotional, instinctual.
Yeah.
So I think it's part of it. I think also just as a kid being bullied, and I remember in my school years, um, from first through seventh grade in the school that I was in there, I knew exactly where I was at in the pecking order. I was at
Mhm.
the number three from the bottom. I knew exactly who was
Wow.
below me, like
Uh-huh. Yeah.
specifically.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I was very not welcome or included among the cool kids. And like, it was not something
Sure.
anybody said, right? It was just
Right.
like,
Like, yeah.
yeah, we don't like
Yeah.
you. Like,
Yeah.
we're not invited. We don't respond to your calls or your like invitations or whatever. It's like, okay.
Wow. I mean,
Yeah.
that's like, it's interesting to me that like that childhood trauma gets evoked by this like very mature adult political conversation,
Hmm.
political stuff. Like it's
Hmm.
so connected for
And
you and for a lot of people,
for
right? Like
everybody,
it's not
right?
just
Exactly.
you. Yeah. It
Yeah.
has to do with
Yeah.
these things.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. Yeah. I
Yeah.
think for me, it's a little different in that like your fear, I think, is around being rejected and not like I don't want to put words on your fear, but like it's something to do with rejection, being outcast, something like that. I have
Yes.
some
And
of
the
that
and the
too.
and then not being able to talk about it. Yeah.
Mm,
Yeah.
right. Yeah.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. Yeah, I have some of that too, because I think uh, when emotions are high or, when the situation is intense, like it was 4 years ago, like it is now, to some extent, um, like there are some folks who share the same political and social beliefs that I do that wouldn't want to be in this conversation because they would see it as a waste of time or
Mhm.
like like being seen as cover for like beliefs that are unacceptable, right? Like if I, as someone has very different beliefs, am willing to have a conversation with you and stay in this relationship, then am I being used, right? Like as cover
Mhm.
for to make you
Mhm.
seem more acceptable to people on my side, right? Like it's these are
Mhm.
very polarizing language that I'm using, but like that's the fear that I think exists in our current culture that you
I
and I
told you.
both have to overcome from different sides. Like we have different, it fills us from different sides, but it's the same kind of
Hmm.
judgment about
Hmm.
being open to these kinds of conversations with each other.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, yeah, 100%. And it's funny with the way you say it, like unacceptable beliefs,
Right.
right? Because
Right.
that to me, that's a foreign concept.
Right.
I don't, I, there aren't, in my world, there are no unacceptable beliefs. There might be beliefs that I don't share,
Hmm.
but there might be beliefs that I think are wrong, dangerous.
Right. Yeah, that word unacceptable is really fraught. Yeah, because yeah, I guess I
Right.
would agree with you. There are beliefs that I think are wrong or dangerous. Does that doesn't make the person who holds those beliefs unacceptable. It makes the
Right.
belief itself something that I want to challenge. You know,
Yeah.
like
Right.
separating those
Yeah. And
things.
maybe we want to put the person in a container, right? If you have a belief that says, I need to kill someone before noon every day, I can't feel good, right? Like maybe we want to put you behind bars. Like it's still a belief, right? I wouldn't say it's, I'd be curious, like how did you get that belief? Like, how did you arrive at that? Right. Like, this is where my mind goes.
That's one of the differences between you and I think many people is that you are very energized by conversations that challenge your beliefs or that are um, curiosity to you, like that are unique somehow. Like, oh, I've never had that conversation before. Like, what does it mean to
Right.
feel like you need to kill somebody before noon every day? Like, what? How does that feel
Yeah.
for you? Where did that come from? Like, you're genuinely curious about that. You're like, oh, let's learn more. And I think that's
Yeah.
not true for a lot of people. A lot of people will be like, no, that person doesn't have anything to contribute. They need to go to their box and stay there. You know,
Right.
there's
Yeah.
nothing to
Yeah.
be learned from having
Yeah.
that conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love people. I want to understand. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. The other,
But I don't, yeah. I was just going to say, I don't think that's true for many people. And so I wonder if sometimes people don't believe you when you say
yeah.
that,
Oh, I
you
think
know?
100% people don't
Yeah.
believe me. Yeah. 100%. And it's hard. Like, it's like, well, watch me, right? Like, it's like, what can I, there's nothing I can do to convince someone that it's just like, no, that
Right.
can't be possible. Right. You're lying.
Right.
And I've
Right.
experienced that for sure.
Yeah.
I was thinking before when we were talking about like I think part of it for me is like I've been very driven by shame and guilt
Mm.
for most of my life,
Yeah.
right? Like shame, I am wrong. There's something fundamentally flawed about me, and guilt, I've done something wrong. And so this triggers both.
Right.
And so shame and guilt is about the disconnect. Oh, if people knew this about me, they would reject me. That's the shame, right? If people knew that I'd done this, or if I did this, the guilt, then they would reject me. There would be a disconnect. So that's at the bottom of it. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that really gets to me emotionally is the lack of the possibility of repair.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
I have a connection. I break the connection, and now there's no way to repair. It's really fascinating because now that I'm thinking about this, that's exactly what happened with my ex-wife.
Mm. Yeah.
The moment I left, she cut off all communication with me.
Yeah.
There's no possibility of repair.
Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Fucking hurt. That was hard.
Yeah.
Yeah. And now my kids too
Right.
cut me off. No
Right.
possibility of repair.
Right.
Yeah. This is a
Yeah.
pattern, apparently.
That's big.
Your life is showing me something here I need to look at. Holy crap.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
That's huge.
Yeah, I'm glad I'm seeing that. I'm glad this is happening. So, I mean, and that's the beautiful thing is one of the things that I think, again, most people don't have this view. They don't understand this, that everything that happens that triggers us is for us. It's to show
Mm-hmm.
us where we're not free. And so when I have this trigger on like what people are going to say about my book and what I'm writing and all that, um, here's my book. Yeah, tiny book, yeah. Pocket constitution practically, right? Like, but anyway, so yeah. When I have that fear, it's not about them. It's not when I get rejected
Right.
like that by these people, it's not about them. It's about me getting visibility into where I'm not free.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
Yeah.
I know what I'm going to work on later today.
Right. Yeah. There's a big
Cliff session.
invitation. Yeah.
Yeah, cliff session. Let's go. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. I guess I don't know if this is relevant or helpful to the personal part of the conversation, but I think from a societal, political part of the conversation, there's a question about like, or a conversation to be had about does there always need to be a possibility of repair, right?
Hmm.
Like what if for the person who's on the having the other half of that experience, right? Because you like, let's go to the PR agency. I don't remember all the details, but the person on the other side of that experience was having their own really intense emotional experience, right? Like something really
Hmm.
big was happening for them to cause them to have that, to write that to you, right? Like that wasn't something they
Hmm.
just like whipped off in a minute thoughtlessly, like that was a whole thing. Um, and so maybe the closing of that door all the way was because they could not or did not want to put resources into the possibility of repair. Like the possibility of repair is somehow threatening or too
Yeah.
much right then for them. And it's not, that's
Yeah.
not got anything to do with you. That may have everything to do with other experiences that they're having in the world, you know?
Absolutely. I
Yeah.
think partly what's happening, I think to answer the question, I don't think that there's should be repair. Like there wasn't.
Right.
Ergo, there shouldn't be. Like
Right.
that's my
Yeah.
fundamental belief.
Yeah.
And I think from my side, again, for me, relationships are trump everything. Like if
Right.
we have a relationship and you do something that I feel is so like crossing the line, I will invite a repair of the conversation of the relationship. And if then like I've after trying I find that there's no path here, I will stop, but I will also always keep a door open. Right,
Right.
if you come back 10 years later, 20 years later, say, hey, you know what, I'm so sorry about what I did back then, or I can see my part in it, and then I like I can see my part and we were both in this and then we can repair. Right, that would
Mhm.
always be my approach. But
Mhm.
what I think also happens is people, the shame and the guilt, like what it does is it makes us scared of ourselves, the political climate, like the whole racism. And if you're not like, it's not enough to be not racist, you have to be anti-racist, otherwise you really are racist. And like it's this whole like mind fuck where you're like, am I racist? Like I don't maybe I am. So you start to get scared of yourself.
Right.
Oh shit, and I might maybe if I end up saying something that reveals this hidden thing about me, and some people notice, oh, you
Right.
really are racist, and then like the social media mob comes down over you and all that stuff, right? Or if you remember what happened with Marie Forleo and Laporte, Danielle Laporte, where they like she had like a photo, like they were doing a new program. It was called Later. It was all about like letting go of your emotional baggage, blah blah blah. But because they used people of color, or they didn't use people of color, or whatever, I don't remember. But everybody was like, "Oh, this is racist," and like that. Oh shit, like oh, and that's the other thing I realized. Like for me, growing up too, I didn't know what the rules were. They changed from day to day. So it's that
Right.
same environment. Like I don't know what where the minefields are. I might be so. I think part of what happens in that case is that the people who watch what I'm saying, they can't refute any of the facts. They
Mm.
can't argue with any of the logic, but they're scared that if they associate with me or even listen to me, they might agree and thereby accidentally revealing that they're racist because obviously I'm a racist. And so
Mm.
it's just too much. And we just need to
Right.
distance ourselves from this person because I can't take
Right.
that risk. Right. It's not
Right.
a rational, it's not a logical approach. But again, we are, you know,
Right.
in so much of this conversation, we're not being rational or logical.
Right. Yeah. And I think that the invitation there too, in part, is to say, like, I think part of my journey around racism has been to say, like, I know I have been and probably still do carry some racist beliefs, right? Like, I'm a white person raised in the United States. Like, I swam in these waters, right? Like, I absorbed what I absorbed. I
Mm-hmm.
am willing and open to being told that something I do or say is racist. I don't
Mm-hmm.
certainly intend that. Like that is not my belief system, right? Like that's anybody who might actually be watching this has never met me. They don't know me, but you do. Like that I am very deeply committed to treating people well, equal rights, like very deeply. Um, but part of what happens in the U.S. for people who are not people of color, right,
Mm-hmm.
is if somebody else who is says, "Hey, this thing that you've said or done um, is racist or lands in a way that is
Hmm.
feels racist to me, right? Like in the Marie Forleo example, perhaps it's our obligation then to say, okay, that is not what I meant, right? Like how do we fix this? What do we do so that this program or this concept or this whatever doesn't hurt you? Because I don't want to hurt you. That's not my goal.
Hmm.
And so like, how do we, if something happens that other people perceive as hurt, and
Hmm.
I'm trying to take it out of the context of just
Right.
race because that's kind of loaded, you know,
Yeah.
if other people perceive something as that you or I do as being hurtful, and we don't want it, our intention is not to cause hurt. We have to
Hmm.
hear that we did cause hurt or that hurt happened. Hurt
Hmm.
happened, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so how do we move forward as
Yeah.
in that situation? How do we move forward to heal that hurt and to
Yeah.
stay together, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. And that
Yeah.
feels like a positive and healthy and important conversation to have.
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
funny because I've just been going through Alison Armstrong, and one of the things she teaches relationships, she's amazing. One of the things she's like, she has this ouch card that you can give
Mhm.
your partner. So when you're in
Right.
gatherer mode, which is the more feminine mode, and you get hurt, whereas when you're in hunter mode, it's more you feel disrespected, different
Mhm.
vibes, different energies. But it's like you give a card that says, "Help, my feelings have been hurt and I urgently need rebooting. This is how to recover me quickly and release amount of injury to you." And then there's like different things, right?
Mhm.
And it's like, what I most need to hear is, "I'm sorry I hurt your feelings." You have to mean it or it won't work. Even if it's not true, say it. "I'm sorry I hurt your feelings." Because it's
Right.
about getting out of that caveman state
Right.
back to reality. So it's like, but what she also says is like, it's a tremendous act of generosity on your part to say
Mhm.
that because you didn't. Like, you
Right.
may have exactly hurt happened, but you know you didn't actually, like, you definitely didn't intend to hurt their
Didn't
feelings,
intend
and
hurt.
like,
Right.
and their feelings got hurt because of their interpretation or understand,
Right.
like, perception of the events, and you're like, well, that's not what like, but that's not helpful in that situation. And
Right.
I 100% agree with that. And I don't think it's our obligation. I think it's a tremendous act of generosity to do that.
Mm.
But it's something that we can choose to do.
Hmm.
And I think it's a good thing to do that. Yeah.
Right.
Um, yeah. And yeah, no, it is really, I love what you're saying about, like, because it's one thing, it's like you're racist, or that was racist, or that landed in a way that felt racist to me. Those are very different things, right? But we tend
Hmm.
to
Sure.
conflate them. And again, I get it. If you're hurt, you're not going to be like perfect
Right.
with the
And
language,
we're talking
right?
about broad social conversations, not deeply
Yeah.
personal relationships. Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Right.
Right.
Yeah.
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 All right. I'd love to dive into that some other time, because I think it is a fascinating subject and we could all learn more about that. It's also like dangerous topic to get into. Would you be out for chatting about how you see in your world the election this year?
Sure.
And I can share
Yeah.
what I'm seeing.
Yeah. Yeah. When you mean like
I mean,
in
the whole idea that, like, this could be the end of democracy or the last
mm,
election, or like how this is the most important election ever. Like, what is it you're seeing there?
yeah. Yeah, definitely up for talking about it. It's I don't think I've ever heard anybody say, or I haven't seen the last election. That's not something I'm
Okay.
seeing.
I see that a lot.
Oh, really? Okay,
Yeah.
that's fascinating. No,
Yeah.
I'm not seeing that, but nothing about the last election.
Mm.
Definitely seeing this election is very important
Mm.
because we as a country need to not allow Donald Trump and the extreme right wing Project 25, like that whole milieu, to have institutionalized power. That needs to
Mm.
be marginalized because the institutions need to be more mainstream, need to be concerned about protecting all Americans, need to be paying attention to economy, immigration, like abortion rights, like all of the big things that are in the conversation right now are not we don't want Trump and the Project 25 and the extreme right wing to have institutionalized power around those things anymore.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay.
So there's a fear, I think, that if Trump wins the election, they will have that and have carte blanche, right? Because the Supreme Court says he can't be convicted of crimes committed and that are official acts. And, he's got like so much power, could have so much power now. He can't ever be elected again as president, but he likes to hang on to power, right? So what's he going to do? He idolizes Putin and Orban and like these people who are dictators. So what's he going to do to try to hang on to power? Like there's that. That's what I'm hearing.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. It's more of a like danger, danger. The policies that will come will be bad. Will be the wrong policies. Yeah.
Okay.
So Trump's refusal to talk about policies, like the policies he would put in place. Yeah.
Okay.
That Trump is not being clear about what he would do. All he's doing is saying, I didn't have anything to do with Project 2025.
Did he?
That's not my policy. That he's not answering policy questions clearly about what he would actually do.
It's funny.
I take it you're hearing something else.
I am. All right, it's really funny. So yeah, Project 2025, obviously not a Trump thing, right? I think he did post his own program on his website, didn't he? As far as I know, that's what I
Last
heard.
I heard there wasn't anything meaningful there. Let me go.
Okay. Because that's what I heard. I haven't really looked at it, but he like I think it had a platform here.
Yeah, there's a platform here. Read the official platform here.
Yeah.
Yeah, but there are things like end inflation and make America affordable again. That's not policy.
Okay. Because I haven't heard a single thing that Kamala wants to do other than I love America and the middle class and I'm not Trump and I'm not Biden. That's what I'm hearing.
That's fascinating. Have you been on her website? She has an issues page in which I
haven't
very specific things like grow small businesses and invest in entrepreneurs. And but has a bunch of detail in it.
But again, growing small businesses is not a policy, right?
Right, but there's a bunch in there. There's details there. Okay. Like you can click and open it up, and it says startup expense tax deduction for new businesses from $5,000 to $50,000.
Is it the issues page or what?
Yeah, on the issues page.
Okay.
Whereas on Trump's, you can't click on any of them and get any actual policies. Like,
okay, fascinating. All right. Well, it would be fun to go into more detail and but read more about the Trump political platform. Well, I mean, there's a lot of text in the PDF if you get in there, right?
Yeah, so I was just looking at the PDF. There is more text there.
Because in my mind, like I mean, obviously he's been in office for 4 years, and we've seen policies there, and to me is like he talks endlessly about what he wants to do. So, but the only things I've heard from Kamala is like, I saw a clip of her on Colbert from a few days ago or something, where she was like, so how are you different? Well, first of all, I'm not Joe Biden. And also with 28 days to the election, I'm not Donald Trump. And that was basically her answer. I'm like, that's not really an answer. So that's
also a comedy show. You know, but I mean, hang on, I'm listening. I just need to let my dog.
Yeah. So anyway, so what I'm hearing is it's weird that you're not there.
Still here.
What I'm hearing is that people on the Trump side saying that literally this could be effectively the last election, not actually the last election, but effectively because of the number of migrants that have been let into the country during the Biden administration, which numbers in the millions, and how they've been specifically placed in swing states, and how there's this fast track to green card and then to citizenship. And that is effectively going to render all of these swing states no longer swing states, but solid Democratic states. And that means like Democratic, one party rule for the foreseeable future, right? And once they have all that power, they can keep doing that. And the migrants are, they're literally inviting them here. They're getting money ahead of American citizens, money for food stamps, money to buy houses, just cash that American citizens are not getting. And they mention California amnesty in 1986, which is what changed California from typically a Republican state to being solidly Democrat ever since. And so that's the concern, which, I mean, to the extent that that's true, do you think that's a legitimate concern? If that indeed is what's happening?
If what's happening is that Democrats are intentionally importing people from other countries to shift the demographic of swing states.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's a feels like a really big if to like,
Sure.
I don't, like I'm not ready to say yes to that if,
Yeah.
if that was true, which it seems very far-fetched to me, because there's a lot of other things that go into determining who gets let into the country and where they're able to settle, right? Like you can't just settle somebody somewhere. That state has to agree to accept them. That city has to agree to accept them. Like it's not like the federal government can just say like, this is what we're doing. So
it's not what I've seen, but let's assume that, yes.
I think it's more complicated. But if that would be true, you're saying, would that be a concern?
Yeah.
I mean, sure. I assume that there's a lot of, it seems like there's a lot of, so many hurdles that you have to hurdle there in order to get to that conclusion.
Right.
That I can't quite wrap my brain around it.
Yeah.
Especially because I've not heard that at all. Like you said, you had that's what you're hearing. I have heard nothing about that. What I'm hearing is much more about the Republicans and the extreme right kind of trying to change election law in places in swing states like Georgia in order to delay the certification of the election or potentially stop the certification of the election.
Okay.
In this next election. And that like the changes that they're trying to make to election law and election processes in order to shift Republican control, to have more Republican control over those election processes. And in particular, there is a belief too that if we elected our presidents by popular vote, they would be Democratic presidents. Like the people of this country would elect a Democratic president. It's the Electoral College that maintains Republican power, and that is no longer fair. That was, the history of the Electoral College.
Why is that not fair? I'm curious about that.
So I don't have all the history at my fingertips, but it's got roots in slave states and free states, and making sure that slave states had enough that slave states that way back when had not as much population, particularly like white voting population, to be able to maintain a voice at the national level, so that the way that the votes are allocated in the Electoral College was to preserve the rights of less populated states that tended to be more Republican states. So that like, I'd have to look at the numbers, but like,
I mean, to me, it's like
Montana versus
the Electoral College. Like if we didn't have the Electoral College, then it would be New York and California, and we'd be done, right? And the Electoral College is the reason that there is a United States of America. Like small, low populated states would have basically no say if it wasn't for the Electoral College, and they would never have agreed to join a union in that way.
Yeah,
that would be. And it's the law. I mean, obviously you can try to change it. They're talking about changing the Constitution now as well. I saw articles about that and how free speech is a problem. They want to change the First Amendment.
Really? No, I haven't seen that.
Oh yeah.
No.
Oh yeah. John Kerry and Hillary have been talking about the need to change the First Amendment, or repeal it or whatever it is. Yeah, I've seen that. Again, I haven't looked deeply into it. But yeah, like I've been seeing stories about migrants being flown on Delta flights, being flown on unmarked flights. I've seen that for years under the Biden administration, that like they're being flown all around. Like the Eric Adams about a year ago or something was on his way to DC to complain to the Biden admin saying, "Hey, like enough of the migrants, we can't handle anymore. Like we're dying under the load of all these migrants." And literally, as he was stepping on that flight, they launched they announced that they're investigating some corruption charges that against him, and he stepped off the plane and went back and had to start defending himself. And so the obvious speculation is like, don't speak out against the admin. Definitely don't speak up against immigration, because that is the most important topic for or project for the administration, because that's how, like, they don't like the citizens because they don't vote the way that they want, so they're going to import some other citizens, give them a bunch of money, and just fast track their way to citizenship
So
so they can
interesting.
vote. So
Yeah,
yeah,
that
yeah.
is so interesting. I would definitely do a little digging there because um, never heard anything like that. I have a hard time. Like, that seems to be completely skipping the fact that as a country, we've got this history and this belief about, extending amnesty when amnesty is deserved, or like trying to be, we're a nation of immigrants, right? Like that's part of the
Mhm.
mythos, the culture of the United States, right? So
Right.
like inviting people here who either are suffering intently in the place that they
Mhm.
don't have a safe place to be, in reasonable numbers, like
Mhm.
offering asylum, or encouraging people here who can contribute in some way to the betterment
Right.
of the country, and that's a value that this country has, and so facilitating that is legitimate. Um,
Mhm.
yeah, how would they know how the people who are migrating in are going to vote, right? Like what? Like,
I
that
think
seems
so. I think the answer to that is A, the margins in the swing states are not that big. Like we can look that up, but like maybe like 20,000 votes, give or take. We should look that out. I think up there, I think it's like six swing states or something. Maybe we can chat GPT that. Um, in in the 2020 election, which were the swing states, and by which margin were they won, and by whom? Let's see what it comes back with. But the argument would be that if the margin is like, here it's 10,500 votes in Arizona, 11,800 in Georgia, 154,000 in Michigan. So that's a big one for Biden. 33 and a half, 80,000, 20,000, 75,000, 371,000 in Florida. So some of these are very small margins. And so say the margin is like 10,000 or 30,000 or something, and you import 10x that number, and the Democrats do it, and they give them money, and they say, "Hey, if you vote Democrat, you can bring your family here too." Chances are that higher than, like,
right.
more than half, like, are going to vote Democrat. That would be the mechanism.
That's interesting. So two things. One, like votes are secret, right? Like there's no way to know that that person
Mm-hmm.
voted Democratic and therefore
No,
has
for
the right
sure.
to bring their family here. So that's like a little bit, but
No, no,
also
no.
like
But no, it's not that way. It's not like you vote Democrat, you get your family. It's more like the
mm,
Democrats is going to allow you to
will
bring,
allow
like,
more. Yeah,
yeah, exactly,
got
right.
it.
Like,
Okay. But so like the other piece of it that's like, I hear that in part as fear mongering because the Republicans can see that younger voters are skewing Democratic, right? Like it's just true that like older voters skew Republican, younger voters skew Democratic, like across most demographics, at least from the data that I've seen.
mhm.
So as my my parents' generation dies off and my child's generation ages in to voting, this country is moving to be more and more democratic. And Republicans are scared of that. And so they're blaming migrants instead of
Yeah,
addressing the fact that younger voters skew Democratic.
possible. I mean, but again, like if this is actually happening, that's kind of irrelevant, like, right? But like if it's true, it's not fear mongering. It's just like what's happening. Um, But I
Oh,
hear like
yes,
that's
but like the last election is clearly fear mongering, right? Like
no,
that's
but not if that is literally what's happening. And in 5 years, like with if we have another 4 years of a Harris administration that's going to do the same thing and fast track these people to green card and to citizenship, then the 2028 election might be done for. Like literally, it might if that's true.
it's not going to be the last election, but it would
No, no,
be
no.
the
The last
Republicans are going to not win anymore because they won't have the votes.
Yeah, it's just like in Venezuela, they just had an election and like Maduro got whatever, like in dictatorships, the ruling
Sure.
party gets 100% of the vote. They still have elections, right? Like
Right. But that's several logic leaps down the conversation, right? Like that's like it's not a dictatorship if there's a free and fair election and the balance of the population votes one way or the other.
right, but if the
If
balance
it's
of
a
the
if it's a
population
free and fair election.
votes and but also if the balance of the vote shifts because we're importing people who vote the way that we want them to vote, that's not how the
Right.
game is supposed to be played, right?
Sure, but also we're only able to import. I don't know what the percentage is of the population that's migrated to the US in the last 4 years, but it's got to be a fraction of the overall population, the voting population, right? It's got to be a tiny fraction of the overall voting population.
I mean, what I've
So
heard is that, but let's see, like, and this is one of the problems too, is that from what I've seen and looked up, like, the statistics on this stuff are not very good. But the numbers I've seen is that it's like the I looked up some of these data. So here we have land encounters, which is not perfect, but it's not terrible either. So we say 2021, it went up from, little, like somewhere maybe like 70K to over 200K a month during the year. Like you can see, like, January, Biden takes office and then it shoots up, right? And then 2022, it's, let me see here.
so but like this data could be anything. Like maybe the data collection methods improved.
No, I understand. I
Maybe
understand. I'm just
like
saying this is what we have. And then it stays high throughout 2022. It stays high, like even higher 2023. And then 2024, they cut it. And then they're like, well, immigration is down by 50% since blah, blah, blah. Yeah. But it was up by 250% since Trump, right? So I mean, something's fishy here, right? Why did these border crossings go up so dramatically after, like literally, like look, it's flat. And we don't have data before 2021. I wish that it went back further, but it doesn't. But like, why does that happen? Like
sure.
that seems
But there's
intentional.
yeah, totally. But there's got to be, I mean, we can't see the answer here, but there's got to be some context there about like why doesn't the data go back further? How maybe they
I
funded more
know.
data collection. Like who knows?
I don't know.
Here,
But
I
I don't
found this.
trust but again, if the Biden administration is doing this, I don't trust the government's data generally.
Mm,
I don't trust them to want us to know what's actually happening.
gotcha.
Um,
So this is Pew Research Center, which is not the government and is one of the
mhm,
ones on that media bias chart that's like considered a
mhm.
fact-based,
Yeah,
like one
yeah.
of the most moderate fact-based things. So it says 1 in 10 eligible voters are naturalized citizens,
I mean, this
right?
is pretty high, 10%. Like are people
10%.
who weren't born here, but and
Or,
also
and
again, if they're in the in if in their they're in the swing states, then that one 10% matters a whole lot, right?
right. So 10% total of
Mm-hmm.
eligible voters, not of citizens, of eligible voters.
Mm-hmm.
And it does say they're growing at the fastest rate in years. So like there's some fact at the bottom of that, what I would call fear mongering at the bottom of that, like
Yeah,
panic button. There is some data there
yeah.
um, for seeing foreign born eligible voters in the US in millions from 2000 to 2022 has gone steadily up. So that's
Mm-hmm.
not there have been Republican presidents and Republican administrations,
Right.
repeatedly in
Yeah.
the last 22 years that you
Yeah, the
can't, like,
question about that
yeah.
too is like, what
So
is the
here,
lag between someone entering and then getting naturalized, right? What is that
right.
process? So there are a lot of questions there, and this is where it would be great to have an honest fucking media that would dive into this and actually
This is
tell
the
the truth.
closest we've got, right? Like, so
Yeah.
they've been here for more than 20 years, most of them.
Hmm.
Um, More than half live in four states: California, Florida, New York, and Texas, none of which are swing states.
Correct. Yeah. 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 And what was it? Where did what was the last year of this data?
2022 is the last I saw.
Naturalized.
Let's see. Yeah, 2022. Pew Research done in 2022.
Mm.
13 states.
Naturalized citizenship. Number five.
Differs widely. Arizona, Georgia, considered swing states.
Mm.
Naturalized citizens make up 14 and 9% in Nevada and Arizona, 7% in
I mean,
Georgia, 5% Pennsylvania, Michigan, 3% in Wisconsin.
yeah. So I mean, Nevada, Arizona, that could easily swing an election, right? If it's 7%, 5%, probably could swing it too. I don't know about 3%, but that seems like those could be swing.
Right, but they're talking about people that have been largely in the country for 20
Yeah,
years.
yeah. Yeah,
So,
yeah. And so no, but the claim is not that they're going to swing this election. The claim is that they're being fast tracked to green card and then from there to citizenship. So it's gonna affect future elections. But if we don't stop the Biden Harris administration for continuing to do this and going down this path, then this is going to be the inevitable outcome. And then once there's citizenship, you can't do anything, right? It's like it's
right,
done. Yeah.
right.
So it's irreversible. I mean, but the greater question is like, what do we want for immigration? Like, do we want 200,000 people a month to come across the border? Is that how we want it to be? Or like, what do we want?
Right.
If we
Yeah,
can,
it's
I mean,
interesting.
I'm speaking, I'm not a citizen, but like,
Right.
if we can design our country, our laws, our borders any way we want, like, who do we want to come here? And for me, it's personal too, right? Because I have spent, you know, well over $100,000 and years. Like I applied for H-1B and like paid my immigration lawyer and went through all that hassle. And then because there were more applications than the quota, they just did a lottery and tossed it out, and that money was gone, right? That time was gone. Applied again, didn't applied again, and then like finally applied for an investor visa, lost 60, $70,000 trying to do that, where it failed. And then I got it with a second investment of 100 grand. Now I've had a visa for 10 years, but I have to go renew it every 18 months, which costs me thousands of dollars. And the trip to Denmark and the uncertainty of can I re-enter the country? Mm-hmm. And I don't have a green card, so I can only work for this company. There's very strict restrictions on what I can do. And I'm creating jobs and bringing in currency. And then people come and just, walk across the border and get allowed to stay here, get a fast track to green card and citizenship. I'm like, how's that fair exactly?
Right. Yeah, it's very complicated. Like it would be interesting to talk immigration policy. I'm not super up on it, certainly not anywhere near what you are. I think like for me, there's those two categories that I mentioned before around like immigration that's intended to be for the betterment of the US, which is what the tests you're having to pass, right? Versus immigration that is like a social good contribution to the world, right? That says like the conditions in this place that you are intolerable. You're like at risk of dying or being raped or having your children stolen from you. And so we need to have some part to play in making the world safer. And this is part of how we do that.
Right.
Yeah. And those are very different things.
But again, like 200,000 a month, like what kind of vetting is that? Is it just like everybody who lives in one of these like 10 different countries or 5 or whatever it is, they're eligible because those countries suck? Is that the deal? Right. How do we vet these? How do we know that they're not cartel members or criminals or bringing drugs or doing human like how do we know that when there's that many people crossing the border how is that possible?
Right. And so again, I'm not super up on this, but one of the things I've heard is that Republican administrations tend to defund the processes that would move people quickly through an evaluation and a judicial process that says either yes or no, and
Mhm.
like either you can stay or you can't stay, and that those
Mhm.
systems are very stretched, so that we have not been doing an adequate job of like screening and drawing conclusions and enforcing those conclusions.
And so in that case, does that mean we just should just let people in without proper screening, or should we just say, hey, these are the number of people that we can handle and that's it, and everybody else go stay at home?
Right. So I don't want to answer that because I don't think that should be the case, right? Like I think what should be the case is that we make a decision as a country about how much funding we think, kind of like the TSA conversation we were having yesterday, right?
Right.
It's like what's the right amount of resources we want to dedicate this to ensure the best
Yeah.
possible screening for a reasonable number of people, and then and then what do we do about the remainder
Yeah.
that we still have to deal with? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, my view on immigration is that any country gets to make the rules that they think is best for themselves, right? Which is, I have no complaints. Like, I'm grateful that I get to live in this country. It's not mine. Like, it doesn't belong to me. I'm grateful that there is a path for me.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's up to any country to decide what they want to do. And they're under no obligation to do any immigration if they don't want to, like any asylums, anything. It's an act of generosity if they choose to. And to me, it seems crazy that there are this many migrants coming. It just seems insane. Because you want to be able to properly assimilate people, vet people, and assimilate people, and make sure that you can handle it, right? But yeah, that's, to me, it's pretty wild. Um, this is one of the charts that have been floating around. So increases in illegal immigration populations in swing states under the Harris Biden administration. So um, the unauthorized migrant population has increased by 400%, 446, 241, 734% in each of these swing states. I don't know what the numbers are for other states, but and they're undocumented, unauthorized, so obviously they're not
Yeah. Vote.
eligible to vote.
Yeah.
But I have seen stories of um, you know undocumented or unauthorized migrants that are registered to vote. I have seen stories of states that forbid removing of non-citizens from voter rolls, and I've seen that Gavin Newsom in California has enacted a law that makes it forbidden to require ID in any election in California. So part of the the allegation here is that yes, these are people who are not allowed to vote, but that doesn't mean that they're not gonna vote. And again, if we do mail-in ballots and then the ballot gets separated from the envelope, then we have no way of knowing if that happened, right?
Yeah, I hear you.
And if
Yeah,
there's no voter
I
ID,
yeah. But so like I have a couple of questions. One is like where did this data come from? And the
right?
other is like again, there's that's several like lines down the path, right? Like of several like hurdles about, so is it true that there are that many unauthorized migrants? If
Mm-hmm.
so, what is the rate at which unauthorized migrants attempt to vote and are successful to vote? Um,
Mm-hmm.
like, is it, because I'm sure it happens occasionally, right? Like people
Mm-hmm.
break laws all the time, right? So sure, but
Mm-hmm.
is it enough to be concerned about? I haven't seen any evidence of that. And
Yeah.
it feels like like that looks like fear mongering to me because there's no source for that data and
Yeah.
there's no place to go to learn more about it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very
Well, I mean, it's not
inflammatory. Fear
actually not
mongering
true.
is maybe
So
not the
then
right word, but
the
like
next
inflammatory.
the next tweet here looks like it has a link to story. So illegal immigration surges cost these swing state taxpayers billions, study says from Market Watch.
Market Watch.
Um, and
That's like,
here's the chart in question.
right.
So that's the source. I haven't read this,
So
obviously.
what is Market Watch and why did that go to the Wayback Machine instead of
Oh,
like,
because paywalls.
oh, got it.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. I was just looking on the Pew
I'm
Research Center. They
assuming,
have a thing about
or maybe,
unauthorized migrants too.
or maybe just because to make sure that you get a like the like if they take it down or change it or whatever.
Mm.
I've also, one of the things I really appreciate about X after Elon took it over is the community nodes. I don't know if you're paying attention to that, because then
Mm-mm.
you get like, this is community noted, right? This data is not a comprehensive account of where all undocumented immigrants are residing. This data only takes into consideration arrivals. Great. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Same comment again.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Oh, and then this one saying, why is enterprising Desert Raven still alive in community notes when he's obviously biased and every single note they post is wrong, every single one. So it's one of these guys that is Desert Raven, enterprising Desert Raven. You get a
Mm.
you get when you I'm someone who can write community notes, and when you do, you get like this artificial
Fake
name.
name. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And then
Yeah.
with this one says NNN is note not needed. The post literally says increasing in swing states.
So it's
Enterprising
basically
Desert
like
Raven
a
is a visual note stealer. Seriously, get a life, everyone report. Okay. Uh,
just,
uh,
yeah.
oh wait, sorry. So anyway, but Communities knows is a great innovation because it adds about like that context around it, which is pretty cool.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but yeah, um, yeah. What
Sorry,
did
I
you
was a
find?
little distracted. I was just looking at the Pew Research stuff that I was finding about unauthorized immigrants.
Yeah.
There's nothing there that's um, essential to share necessarily.
Okay.
But like, um, again, their data stops in 2022. Like that's the last like federally available, like nationally available, I guess is the word that I'm
Mm-hmm.
looking for. Um, yeah, 2022 is still below the peak from 2007.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I haven't seen anything about voting, which is the concern you were raising.
Mm-hmm.
And they are saying it's probably gone up since 2022, just looking at other data. So as of 2022, 3.3% of the total population in the US.
I didn't hear that number. Sorry. What number?
As of 2022, unauthorized immigrants represent 3.3% of the total US population.
Yeah. But again, so what is 3.3% of the population?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, not doesn't have anything to do
So,
with voting eligible, but like
right. And there's
population.
340 million, I think. So that's 11 million. And are these, wait, is
Mhm.
that unauthorized? It used to be illegal immigrants, and then it was undocumented. Now it's unauthorized. Like, I'm so confused. What is that? Do we know what
You're
it used
not
to be?
confused. They just changed the word on you, and you
No,
don't.
but is it the same, or does the definition change as well? And what's the
Oh,
point of changing these words around? Like,
right. That's a whole other conversation. I don't think
yeah, right.
I don't think the meaning has changed. I think it's what used to be referred to as illegal.
Got it.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's my impression, but I can't back that up necessarily.
I can't either. Um, yeah, I took this photo the other day here. This one is like, thank God for immigrants. Thank God for immigrants. And I'm like, you do realize that literally no one on either side of the political spectrum is against immigrants. Like, that's not an
Mm.
issue. Everybody is for immigration. We're just talking about who and when and how and like for what
Right.
purpose and how many. Like, that's the conversation. But like
Right.
these kinds of things, I see that all the time, and it's so dumb. It's like love is love, and like my body, my choice, but not when it comes to vaccines. That's a different story. Like, it's like it's so bullshit and so
It's
dishonest,
it's
right?
emotional. It's intended
Right.
to make an emotional create emotional resonance. And I think it's interesting that we've spent a bunch of time talking about immigration because I think it's not for me, it's not one of the biggest issues around the 2024 election.
Right.
Sure, it's important, but I think
Yeah.
it's not the issue that drives my vote, and
Right.
that's true for a lot of other
No,
people I know.
but I
I
think
think
it's
Elon Musk is concerned about it and Trump is concerned about it, and they're like
right.
rallying
No,
reaction.
100
But
percent right. Because if literally the plan is to import people who vote Democrats so that Democrats will be in power forever, that's an issue, right? I mean, it is. If that's what's actually happening, and that's what people believe is happening, and therefore, obviously, it's a big issue on the right.
Right. I don't believe that's what's happening.
No, but that is what people believe is happening.
Sure, some people believe that is what's
Yeah,
happening, and they're trying to
yeah,
convince other people that that is what's happening.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
yeah.
And like, I mean, Elon is not stupid, obviously.
No, of course not.
He might be misinformed, but
Right,
he's not dumb. Like, and
right.
Trump has been known to like run with stories and like not necessarily fact check everything, right? I'm sure Elon does the same, but like their
Yes.
intellect works a little. Elon's a little bit more detail oriented than Trump is.
Yes. He's also savvier about like he's savvier, you know. Yeah, I think.
About physics and rockets or in cars, or are you thinking like how to
All of the
say
above.
like social media like
All of the above. Yeah.
okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Elon is an interesting character. I'm not entirely sure what to make of him. But anyway, so the migrants and voter rolls, I just did a quick search here. Democrats have been busted in St. Louis, Missouri, trying to register migrants to vote. Um, flyers were given to migrant workers telling them to vote for Harris Walz, and voter rolls in swing states chock full of, I don't know. I don't know if any of these are true, but again, like these are the
Yeah.
stories, right? And I remember seeing a story. I'm not seeing it here, but where some state, um, this is Alabama, said they discovered over 3K illegal immigrants in the voter rolls. But I saw some story about how a state was specifically preventing those illegal registered voters from being purged. Um,
Hmm.
110,000. No, what? That seems, well, 10 million illegals have been registered to vote in November. That's a lot across all the states. That seems like a lot, but these say total, whatever. I don't know what the fuck that is. All right. That's definitely community noted. So never mind.
Right.
Um, but yeah, I was curious if I could find the one that was like, um, that was about, um, the
Wow.
like being prevented from removing them, right? But you
Right.
can see if people see this over and over again, and I've seen
Sure.
a lot of that, that you would be a little concerned. And
Right.
I would hope that we would have a media again that would hold, that would be like, if that's what's
Right.
happening, that's not okay. And that would like just the fact that this is a credible allegation from the leading presidential candidate, from, the world's richest freaking man, and like
Right.
from a lot of people on that side of the spectrum, that
Yeah.
is like, all right, we need to get to the bottom of this, not in a biased way, but in an honest way. Like if you and I were to sit down and like, let's actually like hire some researchers and get to the bottom of this fucking thing with respect and like
Right.
we're not trying to be biased. We're actually trying to get to the truth. Like, seems like something that our media could do if they wanted to,
Right.
just to, if nothing else, just to put everybody at ease, right? Just like with the election, just, hey, let's just fucking go all in on researching all of these claims instead of like trying to like just shut it down. No, this didn't happen. No, shut up. But like, really, hey, look, we respect that you
Right.
feel, but just like we talked about with racism, like, hey, I respect the fact that you feel hurt,
Right.
and I want to be generous to you. And like, I don't feel like I said something that was wrong. I'm not going to say that, but like, I don't feel
Right.
like I said something wrong, but I'm going to respect the fact that you feel hurt. And now let's make sure that everybody feels really good about this election and the result. That's what
So
we're saying.
that I can get behind, like that concept of like whether or not there is any truth to all of
Mm-hmm.
these things that are being shared on Twitter or I mean X or whatever else.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you, person who I care about because you're my neighbor, are
Mm-hmm.
scared and
Mm-hmm.
concerned and have a need information. So how can we collectively get you information that either proves or disproves this concern so
Mm-hmm.
that we have a shared that makes a lot of sense to me.
Right.
The place where I get a little tangled up is like I just did a quick search for what did I look for? I think I Googled are unauthorized migrants registering to vote in the United States, and I get this bipartisanpolicy.org thing,
Mm-hmm.
which says 24 instances of non citizens voting between 2003 and 2023. The Heritage Foundation, which is a right-leaning group,
Mhm.
Brennan Center for Justice analyzed almost 24 million votes, 2016 election, 30 instances.
Right.
So to me, that's like, okay, well, Elon and Trump and a bunch of people are freaked out about it, but there's not data to support it being a legitimate concern. So
Right.
if that's the case, then do we just need to share it? Or we just need to like screenshot that and share it? Or like,
Right.
what do we need to do to like,
Yeah.
whoo, the fears, you know?
Yeah. 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 So, I mean, first off, whenever I hear the words bipartisan, I think hoax. Like that's where my mind
Really?
goes. Yeah, because
Why?
bipartisan, like the immigration bill that the Biden administration tried to get through earlier this year was a bipartisan bill, which meant there was one Republican involved in
Hmm.
drafting the
Sure.
bill.
It just
That's
means
what
that
makes
there's
it
somebody on
bipartisan.
both sides of the aisle.
Right. And the way that I see politics is it's not Republican versus Democrat, it's the uni party. They're basically fundamentally aligned, and they're fundamentally aligned against Trump and the MAGA, the Make America Great movement, the America First movement. Right. Because
Interesting.
they're all corrupt, they're all being blackmailed by the FBI and whoever, and they're all being bribed by industry and whatever. So they all want the same thing. They want to go to war all overseas and spend a bunch of money. They all just want to do their thing and not be concerned with people. And Trump and the MAGA people are getting in their way. They hate them. Like the Republican Party has not been nice to Trump at all. They didn't want him as the candidate. He's only the candidate because they couldn't get rid of him.
Right. So there's a whole lot there.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
can't go, can't, yeah, I can't follow you quite there,
Right.
because there's so many, starting from Republicans and Democrats are the same. Like I hear your concern
They're not
around,
exactly the same, but if you look at individual people in the like they're all bribed and blackmailed by the same people, so it doesn't really matter much.
right, but
Not all of them, but almost all
that's
of them.
not been
Most of them.
proven to me yet. Like
Sure.
I don't go there yet. And so
Sure, sure.
yeah. So like starting from the very beginning, I can't follow down the rest of that
Yeah.
trail. I hear that you do,
Mhm.
that's a belief that you have.
Yeah.
Um, so I appreciate you saying that the word bipartisan is a red flag word for you. That
Yeah.
that's like a danger word.
Well,
For
to
me,
me,
it's not.
it's a manipulation word, right? It's
Hmm.
it's it's a smokescreen to make it seem like if you disagree with it, it means that you're clearly a radical, whatever, something, right?
Right, right,
Like it's something they say, well, Republican, like Trump told the Republicans not to vote against this, bipartisan immigration bill. And when you look at what it actually said, there was a lot of stuff in there that was very questionable. And I looked it up when I was writing the book. I don't remember the details right now, but one of the things was it like the um gave the government more control in the states, less power to control like flows of immigrants, for example.
right.
And this is what happens so often, right? Is that like he's one of the Thomas Massey. I don't know if you've been following him, but he's a member of, is he Senate or House? I think he's Senate, I forget. But he talks about how every year, instead of passing individual budget bills, which people have been asking for, it's always like December 20th, they bring out this massive thousands of pages of
Right,
bill. And then they're like, if you just sign this right now without reading it, you can go home and be with your family for Christmas. Or
right.
you can hold all of us hostage here over the holidays. What do you guys want to do? And then they all fucking sign it. Nobody has read what it is. And I don't think that's a good way to run the government.
There's a whole, we could talk for hours about this stuff, about
Yeah.
that. Like just
Yeah.
that right there, like how do we have an effective budgeting process in Congress when people have very different perspectives and everybody is like playing politics with the budgeting process, every people on both
Yeah.
sides of the aisle. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't, I haven't looked into it, but yeah, no, totally. Yeah.
Yeah.
But so, I think the reason for the bipartisan thing is like, in the FBI since the founding, J. Edgar Hoover ran a project called COINTELPRO. CIA was part of that as well, where they were monitoring MLK and presidents and Congress members and all that stuff. And we know that that was happening so that like the FBI was basically blackmailing politicians. Um, I don't think we have any reason to believe that that stopped, right? Jeffrey Epstein, we know like he ran a blackmail operation. He had people have sex with underage girls. The FBI raided all his houses, took all the material. What happened to that? I don't know. But now the FBI has it. If the FBI is in the business of blackmailing politicians and other influential people, that's a convenient thing stash for them to have. They also took Sean Combs stuff. Like, I just don't like, I think that that's the business that they're in, is to blackmail people. And what was interesting is the day after they raided a brothel in DC on November 8, a brothel that was frequented by, members of Pentagon and members of Congress and a bunch of other people. And that same day, Republicans changed their mind on $300 million of funding for a new FBI headquarters.
Yeah, none of that is stuff that I am savvy about, know about.
No.
Like, yeah.
No. Yeah.
Yeah. Not sure where to go with it either.
No.
And I'm getting tired. So
no, let's wrap here. But it's just like, I think that's what I and a lot of other people are seeing. It's just like this like, it's what I've been talking about is like, it's not Democrats versus Republicans. That's a smokescreen. It's not really left versus right. It's really, there is an apparatus that I've adopted the term the blob, that are influencing media, that are blackmailing people, that are pulling the strings, whatever. And like, everything we see on TV, everything we read in the media is just the TV show. The reality TV show version of it is not what's actually happening. And that makes it really hard.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'm not gonna lie, like, it feels like when I read that stuff, when you write about it, when you talk about it, like, it doesn't connect with my experience of living in this country, in this government, like, as a voter, as a person who follows the news. I'm certainly willing to believe that there are bad actors. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Do I think that they are a shadow government manipulating the existing government? No, I don't. But also, that's part of this point of these conversations, is for me to be exposed to ideas that I find unrealistic and try to entertain them in order to see if there is something there that I should be paying attention to, and vice versa,
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. No, I mean, it's shocking, right? It is like a shocking thought to entertain. It really is. And yeah, it's something that I've been like, it was very much news to me and shocking to me when I first started hearing about these things and reading about these things. And I've just been like seeing more and more and more and more evidence of some of these things be true. But a lot of it is like extrapolation, right? Like, how many members of Congress are blackmailed in what way, but you can, it looks like there are certain people who have more spine than others, and what is it? Is it like they had an affair with someone and they don't want their wife to know or their constituents to know? Is it that they're just like, hey, the day-to-day corruption of Washington, where it's just like lobbyists paying, funding your campaign and whatnot, and then like you kind of owe some favors, and that's how we do it? What is it? Right? I don't know.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
For next time.
For next time. Yes. Well, I mean, at least now we have a better sense of what people are. I mean, I really appreciate the perspective on what you're seeing about the election and the threat of a Trump win.
Yeah. Same.
Yeah.
It's helpful to hear what you're seeing and why there's that, like, gives me a better understanding of why there's that sense of panic among the right that I don't have.
What's so fascinating is that I had no idea that was what you were seeing, right?
Right.
And it sounds like you didn't really know what I was seeing. And so it's kind of like we end up, the conversation ends up being like people yelling, but like they're just in completely different realities. And so like
Right.
you see someone and it just looks like a crazed, unhinged, what is this guy talking about? And then like the other person looks
Right.
like, what the hell? What? And it's
Right.
like, I think, and then when we're like, okay, this person's clearly lost a plot, right? And then that's where we have that
Hmm.
like divisiveness and radicalization, which, if you'll allow me, like bring full circle, because like part of when people reject me in that way, hey, delete my number, I have no space for racists and bigots, and like we need to
Hmm.
cancel your contract because whatever, you're
Right.
not. um and then people aren't willing to engage in conversation and find understanding, or just explain to me what I did that was so bad, or just repair. Then I noticed the instinct to want to be like, okay, like forget it, like to kind of just want to distance, and like, okay, like they're crazy, we can't even have a conversation. Like it's part of that whole of like dividing us, right?
Right.
And radicalizing, and just being like, all right, if you're like that, then like, I mean,
Right.
you're a crazy person or so, I don't know. like,
Right.
but
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
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 And then we just get further and further apart, instead of, oh, like I'm curious, like tell me more. So
Right. Yep.
yeah,
Exactly. Yeah.
all right,
Well,
thank
it's
you
been good
so much
talking to
again
you. Thank you.
for doing this.
Thank you for enjoying my cat's visit to the
Oh, for
conversation too.
sure.
So,
Anytime.
all right. Till next
Cool.
time.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right, thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye.